They told me I'd stay here, just for a week. But when I woke up on that first morning and saw the unfamiliar ceiling, a pale cream color, too clean, too quiet, I knew someone had made a decision about my life without asking me. And I was 74, not a helpless child forgotten in a hospital ward. My name is Margaret Doyle, though they whispered it here as if it belonged to someone fading. But I wasn't fading. Not yet. The nurse, sweet girl, nervous hands, called me Mrs. Doyle, then hesitated, checked a chart, and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I meant owner." Owner of what? I almost laughed. I had nothing here, not even my slippers. But she hurried away before I could question her, leaving me with that strange word hanging in the air like a label pasted on the wrong package. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my arms, the leftover fog from the mild stroke that had frightened Daniel and Christine more than it frightened me. I remember trying to reassure them with a joke, but they looked at me as if I'd slipped behind some invisible curtain and might not find my way back. Fear does strange things to children, even when those children are in their 40s and 50s. A knock came at the door, soft and polite. A young man stepped in, trim suit, perfect hair, rehearsed smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Doyle. I'm Leonard, care home manager." He spoke as if I'd been here for months, not hours. "We're grateful to have you with us. Your children said you needed a calm environment while arrangements are sorted out." "Arrangements?" I asked. He smiled again. "Transitioning can be stressful." The way he said transitioning made me feel like I was already halfway into a grave. After he left, I reached for my handbag, relieved to see it hadn't vanished like the rest of my life seemed to. My phone was charged. No messages. No missed calls. Strange, considering Daniel and Christine had promised to check in constantly. I dialed Christine. Straight to voicemail. Daniel, too. It wasn't like them. Or maybe it was, and I was only now willing to see it. I swung my legs off the bed, testing my balance. The room was modest. Too modest for the fee they must have quoted my children. A single armchair by the window, a dresser with a missing knob, a curtain that didn't quite meet the wall, and a framed photograph of a beach I'd never been to. As if they expected the picture to give me comfort. I walked to the window. The garden outside was tidy, quiet, with a stone path curling around trimmed bushes. A few other residents were wheeled out by staff. Blank eyes, bowed heads. I pressed my hand to the glass. I have always feared losing my mind, but losing my place in the world felt far worse. A soft voice broke into my thoughts. "Mrs. Doyle? Breakfast is ready, and Mr. Quinn asked if you'd stop by his office afterward." "Mr. Quinn?" I asked. She nodded. "He said you'd understand. Since you're the owner." Again that word, as if they were determined to make it stick. I followed her to the dining room, my steps slow but steady. Years ago, I used to run a small shop with my late husband, a place where every crack in the floor, every chipped mug had a story. I knew how things worked. I knew how people hid what needed hiding. So when I reached the dining room and several staff members glanced at me, then quickly away, whispering, I felt that old instinct tighten inside me. Something here was wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet wrong. The kind of wrong that grows roots. I ate a few bites of oatmeal, though my stomach resisted. My eyes kept drifting to the hallway where a door marked administration stood slightly ajar. A shadow moved behind it, tall, controlled, watching. After breakfast, I asked the nurse to direct me to Mr. Quinn's office. She looked startled, almost concerned. Are you sure? He said he'd call for you when he was ready. I met her eyes. I've been ready for a long time. I walked toward that office alone, ignoring the tremor in my right hand. It wasn't fear. It was something sharper. Something I hadn't felt in years. A memory rose, my husband once saying, "Maggie, you're the kind of woman who sees the storm before the clouds even gather." At the office door, I paused. On a small brass plate beside it, Harold Quinn, Director. But beneath the name, in smaller letters, there was something else. Something that made my breath catch. Property Records Liaison. Property. Owner. Arrangements. I reached for the doorknob, and in that moment, I understood. I wasn't here to recover. I was here because someone had plans for my life that had nothing to do with my well-being, and everything to do with what I owned. I stood at Harold Quinn's door longer than I meant to, my hand on the cold metal knob. A woman my age shouldn't hesitate this much, but something in the air behind that door felt calculated. Still, I pushed it open. At 74, I've learned that fear only grows if you feed it. Harold looked up from a stack of folders. Tall, tidy, a man who seemed stitched together from other people's confidence. His smile was too smooth, as if he'd practiced it on a mirror until no part of it betrayed what he really thought. "Mrs. Doyle," he said, standing, "welcome. Please sit." That welcome sounded like it belonged to someone he hoped to impress, or someone he hoped to control. I didn't sit. "Your staff keeps calling me owner. Do you know why?" For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise. Annoyance at being asked too early. "Well," he said lightly, "there must have been a mix-up in how your file was labeled. We've been reorganizing our internal system. Nothing to worry about." I leaned on my cane. "People don't call me something for no reason." He gestured again to the chair. "Please." "I can explain better if you sit." I sat, not because he asked, but because standing made my leg tremble, and I refused to let him see that. He folded his hands. "Your children said you're staying with us temporarily. A rest, a recovery. They're making some decisions about your home." "My home is fine," I interrupted. "And I'm fine." His smile didn't move. "I'm sure. Still, transitions are often stressful." Second time he used that word, as if he was easing me into something. "Your children signed the admission papers," he continued, tapping a folder with his finger. "Everything is in order. Medical notes, insurance, temporary guardianship." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Guardianship? Oh, only for the duration of your stay," he said quickly. "Standard procedure after a health event." "I never agreed to it," I replied, my voice low, steady. "You were recovering from a stroke," he said gently, but not kindly. "They had to act quickly." That was his version of mercy, telling me I had no say in my own life. "May I see the papers?" I asked. He slid a folder closer but kept his hand on it, as if he were handing a child a delicate object. I opened it. The first page held my name, written in clean, strong strokes. Except it wasn't my handwriting, not even close. I traced the signature with my thumb the way I once traced my husband's name on old documents when I missed him. My own signature always had a slight right lean, a curl on the M. I never managed to unlearn. The one on the page sat stiff, upright, almost printed. "This," I said quietly, "isn't mine." Harold clasped his hands. "Your children assured us everything was handled." A soft knock broke the moment. A staff member peeked in. "Mr. Quinn? The auditors are asking about—" Oh. She froze when she saw me, then tried to recover. Sorry. I didn't realize the owner was in a meeting. Again, that word. I closed the folder deliberately. I want copies of everything. Harold's smile thinned. Of course. I'll have them prepared. When? Soon. That's not a time, I replied. His eyes hardened just enough that I saw the real man underneath, a man who didn't like being questioned. Mrs. Doyle, he said, polite but cold, your children trust us, and they expect you to rest. Let us handle the technicalities. I've handled things my whole life, I answered. I'm not starting to hand them over now. Before he could answer, I stood and left, feeling his gaze burn between my shoulder blades. In the hallway, my hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from something older. Something I hadn't felt since the days I fought through the grief of losing my husband. A stubbornness, a refusal to be erased. I walked back toward my room, nodding politely at staff who pretended not to be watching me. Every whispered word seemed to trail behind me like a draft. In the doorway of my room, I stopped. My suitcase, half empty when I last saw it, was now fully unpacked. My clothes folded into drawers, my toiletries lined up on the bathroom counter. Someone had placed a pair of soft slippers by the bed. My life arranged without my permission. I sat on the edge of the bed, forcing my breath steady. The children's silence, the forged signature, the staff calling me owner. Harold's eagerness to keep me quiet. Pieces didn't add up, unless they weren't meant to, unless the truth was something my children didn't want me to find. My phone buzzed suddenly. A message. Christine's name on the screen. Mom, please don't stress about anything, just rest. We'll explain everything soon. Explain what, exactly? I stared at the words until they blurred. Somewhere in this place, someone had decided I was easy to move, easy to sign for, easy to silence. But I am Margaret Doyle, and I don't disappear quietly. The next morning began with the kind of silence that feels arranged, as if someone had instructed the walls not to echo too loudly. I woke before the nurses made their rounds, my thoughts already pulling me toward the same question. What exactly had my children done? I reached for my phone. Still no missed calls. No messages from Daniel. Nothing from Christine except yesterday's bright little command to rest. I had raised both of them, fed them, sat through their tantrums, their exams, their heartbreaks. Yet their silence now felt like a locked door. At breakfast, I forced myself to eat half a toast, though my appetite had fled. Staff walked by with their eyes down, which only confirmed what I felt in my bones. My name had become something whispered in the hallways, and not for the reasons they thought. When I finished and stepped into the corridor, my phone rang, a rare, sharp sound in this muted place. The number looked familiar. My bank. I answered immediately. Mrs. Doyle, this is Karen from the main branch. I'm calling to verify a transfer, a rather significant one. A cold weight settled in my stomach. What transfer? Funds from the sale of your property, she said. I just need to confirm the destination account. I held the phone tighter. My property hasn't been sold. No, Mrs. Doyle, she corrected gently. It has. The sale closed last week. The proceeds were wired yesterday. For a moment, the hallway tilted. I leaned against the wall, steadying myself. Tell me the amount. She read it out. My home, my garden, my memories wrapped in one number. A number that shouldn't have belonged to anyone but me. And the receiving account? I asked. I'm afraid I can't disclose that without your authorization signature. The one we received was part of the sales package. My signature, I repeated, though the word tasted foreign. Yes, it appears on the closing documents. My heart thudded once, heavy and slow. Can you send copies to my email? Of course, I'll forward them within the hour. And, Mrs. Doyle, if any of this seems unusual to you, we advise contacting a legal representative. Unusual. Such a small word for what felt like betrayal. When I hung up, the corridor looked different, longer, more artificial, as if someone had stretched it while I wasn't watching. My house was gone. I didn't get to choose the buyer. I didn't get to walk through it one last time. I didn't get to close the curtains, to touch the doorframe that still held faint pencil marks from the years I measured my children's height. I made my way back to my room, feeling surprisingly steady. Sometimes shock brings clarity, like wiping steam from a mirror. When I opened my email, the documents were already waiting. The scanned signature looked nothing like mine, not even an attempt. Whoever forged it didn't care enough to mimic me. They counted on me not to question anything. Page after page confirmed what I feared. The sale had been completed under a power of attorney I had never granted. I set the phone down and folded my hands in my lap. My fingers felt cold, but my mind was warm and bright, like a flame catching dry leaves. There was a knock. Leonard stood in the doorway. Mrs. Doyle, is everything all right? You rushed back from breakfast. I received a call, I said plainly. My house was sold. He blinked once. Ah, yes. Your children they mentioned nothing, I cut him off. And I never signed anything. His expression didn't shift, but his eyes flickered, calculating, searching for the right script. Mrs. Doyle, these transitions are complicated. After a medical event, stop calling it a transition, I said. It's not a funeral. He pressed his lips together, smoothing his tie. I think it would be best to speak with your children. So do I answered. But they don't seem to think the same. I stepped past him. I didn't owe him more words. Back in the hallway, I tried calling Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I called Christine. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice bright with the kind of cheer people use to hide their guilt. Mom, I was about to call. Christine, I said. My house has been sold. Silence. Then a breath. We did what we thought was best. For whom? For you, she said quickly. You can't live alone anymore. It's too risky. You took my home. We protected you, she insisted, and the money is safe. Where? I asked. Another pause. It's being managed. By whom? Daniel, she admitted. He found an opportunity. Mom, don't get worked up. You're not well, and I am well enough to know when something is stolen from me. Her tone hardened. You're overreacting. Everything is under control. Whose control? But she had already ended the call. I lowered the phone slowly. Not a misunderstanding, not confusion, a choice. A decision made behind my back as if I had already left the world and they were dealing with my remains. I sat down on the bed, my breath steady, my heartbeat slow. It's remarkable how quiet anger can be at my age, how it sinks deep like a stone settling at the bottom of a lake. My house was gone, but I wasn't. And that, I suspected, was going to be a problem for someone. The care home looked different once I knew my house was gone. The hallways felt narrower, the staff quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets they didn't dare let slip. I moved slowly, not because of age, but because I was listening. To footsteps, to whispers, to the way people paused when I passed. I began to notice things I hadn't seen before. The front desk had a drawer that never fully closed, stuffed with unsigned forms. The medication cart held more labels than patients, and every time the door to administration opened, someone inside lowered their voice. After lunch, I wandered toward the small lounge where residents watched television. No one looked at the screen. They sat like furniture, placed, positioned, forgotten. A woman with white curls and kind eyes reached for my hand when I passed. "You're the new owner," she whispered. I sat beside her. "Why do people keep saying that?" She looked around nervously. "That's what they told the staff last month. New owner coming. Someone with a Doyle name. Last month, before I even arrived." "Who told them?" I asked. She pointed toward administration. "Him. Harold." I thanked her and stood. My knees almost buckled, but I steadied myself before anyone could see. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught two nurses speaking in hushed voices. They said she signed everything, but she doesn't look like she knows. Quinn should have waited. They went silent when they noticed me. I walked past them, pretending I hadn't heard. The administration door was open again. Papers were spread across the desk, and I recognized something. My name printed on a ledger in bold black letters. I paused in the doorway. "Is that my file?" The young accountant jumped, nearly knocking over a mug. "Mrs. Doyle? Sorry, I didn't expect— Mr. Quinn isn't here." I didn't ask for him. He swallowed, eyes darting toward a folder with a colored tab labeled Property Holdings. My name was on the tab. "Why is my name there?" I asked, stepping inside. That's part of the restructuring." "What restructuring?" He hesitated. "Mr. Quinn didn't explain?" "He explained nothing." The accountant shifted his weight, torn between fear and the instinct to tell the truth. "The facility, it's been struggling, financially. They said a transfer of ownership would protect it from closing." I felt my pulse slow, the way it does when news stops being surprising and becomes inevitable. "A transfer to whom?" "To you," he whispered, "at least on paper. Temporarily." Temporarily. Another word they all use the same way: gentle, quiet, deceitful. "And my children agreed to this?" I asked. He nodded, though his eyes apologized. "They signed the authorization." I closed my eyes for a moment. My children hadn't just sold my home. They had offered my name like a shield to protect a business drowning in debt. "What happens?" I asked. "If the debts aren't paid?" He looked sick. "Then the legal responsibility falls on the owner." "On me." I walked out before he could say more. Back in my room, I locked the door and leaned against it. The room felt too small now, too temporary, too much like a place designed to keep someone quiet while others signed away her life. My phone buzzed with an email, another document from the bank. A note attached by the manager. "Please confirm this signature is yours." It wasn't. I stared at the forged name until my hands steadied. I wasn't panicking. Panic belongs to people who still believe they can lose everything. I'd already lost what mattered most. Now I was only deciding what to take back. A soft knock came at my door. "Mrs. Doyle?" It was the young nurse, Emily. "Mr. Quinn asked if you're free to speak with him later." I opened the door just enough to see her face. "Tell him," I said quietly, "that I won't be signing anything." She swallowed. "He said you might feel that way." "Did he?" I asked. "And what did he say to do next?" Her eyes flicked downward. "He said, it's best to keep you comfortable." Comfortable, the word people use when they don't plan to give you choices. Thank you, Emily, I said, but I'm not here to be comfortable. When she left, I sat at the small desk, folded my hands, and breathed in slowly. I had spent my whole life solving problems quietly, raising children, running a home, keeping a marriage steady through storms. Now I understood the shape of the storm in front of me. They thought age made me harmless, but I was still Margaret Doyle. And I was beginning to remember all the ways a quiet woman can fight. I didn't go to Harold's office that afternoon, though he sent 2 different staff members to check on me. I pretended to nap, but my mind was awake, sharper than it had been in years. There's something about betrayal that clears the fog of age. It's like cold water on the face. You stop drifting and start seeing everything. By evening, the halls had settled into their soft routine. The residents napped in chairs. The nurses whispered to each other as they prepared medication rounds. I sat in the armchair by my window, watching the sun slip behind the garden wall. I'd spent most of my life believing that the people closest to me would protect me. Now I understood. I'd mistaken proximity for loyalty. A light tap on my door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Harold Quinn stood there, smiling the smile of a man used to getting what he wants. "Mrs. Doyle," he said warmly. I was hoping for a moment. I stepped aside, not out of politeness, but because I wanted to see his face clearly in the room's bright light. He sat without being invited, crossing one leg over the other. "I understand you've received some rather overwhelming news." "These transitions are difficult." "That word," I said quietly. "You keep using it." He tilted his head. "What word?" "Transition. As if I'm being moved between states of existence." He chuckled softly, the way men laugh when they think a woman is being emotional. "It's just a figure of speech. We're here to help you adjust." "I don't need to adjust," I said. "I need the truth." He clasped his hands. "All right. What would you like to know?" "Why am I being called the owner of this place?" A pause. Barely a second, but enough. "There was a planned restructuring," he explained smoothly. "Your children were informed. They agreed we could formalize certain documents using your name for tax advantages." He said this the way someone offers a blanket on a cold evening, as if he expected gratitude. "My children knew?" I asked. They supported the idea fully. Supported. The way people support a leaning wall just long enough to walk past it safely. "And what exactly am I expected to own?" I asked. His eyes cooled. "Only on paper, Mrs. Doyle. You wouldn't need to do anything. The facility has some debts, old contracts, unfortunate timing. Assigning temporary ownership protects everyone involved." "Everyone except the owner," I said. He smiled again, but this time the mask cracked at the edges. "You're worrying unnecessarily. Your children are handling everything. They assured us you were comfortable with decisions being made on your behalf." I held his gaze. "You forged my signature." His eyelids flickered. "That's a serious accusation." "It's also true." He leaned forward. "Mrs. Doyle, listen to me. This is a delicate matter. Your family wants you safe. We want you safe. The last thing anyone needs is confusion." "Confusion," I repeated. "Is that what you call selling my home?" "I call it preparation for your future," he said calmly. "Your children were overwhelmed. We stepped in to ease the burden." I felt my breath quieten. "How long has this been planned?" He hesitated, and that was my answer. "Longer than I've been here," I said. "Your staff knew last month." He stood abruptly, smoothing his suit jacket. "You're tired. These conversations can wait." The important thing is that you trust us. I don't. He stopped at the door, hand on the frame. Then I suggest you learn to. For your sake. When he left, the room felt colder, not frightening, just cold, like a draft from a door left open too long. I sat again in my armchair, watching the garden lights blink on. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Something inside me had settled, the way a stone settles at the bottom of a pond, immovable. Trust them? He had no idea who he was speaking to. I'd lived through years of grief, through the slow collapse of a marriage under illness, through raising children with more needs than gratitude. I'd balanced books, run a home, buried a husband, survived a stroke. I knew how to stay quiet when necessary. I also knew when to stop being quiet. And this was that moment. Tomorrow, I decided, I would not wait for truth to come to me. I would go and take it myself. I woke before dawn, the room still wrapped in a gray calm. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, letting my feet find the floor. My joints protested, but quietly, like old friends who had learned not to complain too loudly. I wasn't fragile. I was simply 74, and 74-year-old bones carry their memories honestly. I dressed slowly, sweater, loose slacks, my husband's old wristwatch. The band was too big now, slipping down to the ridge of my wrist, but I wore it anyway. It reminded me I had lived a life before all this, a life where I made decisions, and no one dared make them for me. When I stepped into the hallway, the night nurse nodded politely. Her kindness was genuine, which made it stand out in this place. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "I've slept enough," I replied. "I need to stretch my legs." She didn't stop me. Maybe she saw something in my posture that warned her not to. I walked to the small common room where a shelf held old magazines and a chessboard missing a rook. I didn't need entertainment. I needed space to think. And I finally let myself consider something I had avoided until now. Who I used to be. Most people in this home looked at me and saw a grandmother, a patient, a woman to coax into docility. They didn't know the years I'd spent running the Doyle hardware shop after my husband fell ill. They didn't know my mornings started with ledgers and supplier calls, nor that I once negotiated a 3-year contract with a manufacturer who underestimated me because I wore cardigans instead of suits. They didn't know that quiet women often win. I sat in one of the plastic chairs and folded my hands. My memory was still sharp, sharper even, now that anger had straightened everything in me. I thought of the forged signature, the sale, the fabricated guardianship. My children, who had once run to me with skinned knees and trembling lips, now too busy to answer the phone unless it benefited them. I wasn't a naive woman. I had just allowed myself to hope. Hope is a gentle lie we tell ourselves to keep the peace. Around 6, the morning staff trickled in. Emily, the young nurse, gave me a small wave. She hesitated, then approached. "Mrs. Doyle," she whispered, "you should be careful today." "Why today?" "Mr. Quinn's in early. He's unsettled." "Unsettled. Good. He should be." She leaned closer. "Just don't let him corner you alone." I nodded. I liked Emily, not because she was kind, but because she told the truth even when it cost her something. After breakfast, I walked outside to the garden. The air was crisp, the kind that reminds you you're still alive no matter who's trying to bury your autonomy. I sat on a bench beneath a maple tree whose branches sagged like tired shoulders. A soft crunch of gravel announced someone approaching. I expected Harold. Instead, it was a resident, a thin man with a narrow face. He sat down without asking. "You're the new one," he said. "I am. They did the same thing to my sister, you know." His voice was steady, not bitter, just factual. Moved her in, took her house, signed papers she never saw. By the time anyone noticed, everything was gone. I turned to look at him fully. "How did they get away with it?" "They counted on her being too tired to fight," he said, "and too ashamed to ask for help." Shame. Yes. I'd felt the edge of it. The humiliation of realizing your own children thought you were a burden. He patted the bench arm. "You don't look like someone who gives up." "I don't," I answered quietly. He nodded approvingly. "Then they won't know what to do with you." Later, as I walked back inside, I caught my reflection in one of the glass doors. A small woman, gray hair pinned back neatly, shoulders straight. I saw lines of age, yes, but also something else, a steadiness, a clarity born of loss. Inside, Harold waited like a crow on a branch, pretending patience. "Mrs. Doyle," he called, "we really must finalize your updated documents." I walked past him, not briskly, not defiantly, just with the dignity of someone who no longer entertained conversations meant to trap her. "Mrs. Doyle," he repeated, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." I paused at the stairs, turned slightly. "For whom?" He didn't answer. His silence was as revealing as any admission. Back in my room, I closed the door and breathed in deeply. I no longer felt frightened. I felt awake. They had taken my house. They had tried to take my name. Now they wanted to take the rest, my autonomy, my silence, my compliance. But I remembered the woman I used to be, the one who handled inventory, negotiated contracts, made decisions. The one who buried a husband with her own hands and still got up the next morning to keep the business running. She wasn't gone. She was just getting started. I waited until mid-morning, when the hallways grew busy enough to let me move unnoticed, but not so crowded that staff hovered. Routine is a wonderful disguise. At my age, people assume every step I take is slow and aimless. They never imagine it's deliberate. I headed toward administration again, this time with a purpose sharper than fear. The door was partly open, voices drifting out. I paused just outside. "She's asking too many questions," someone said, a man, tense. "That's temporary," another replied, and I recognized Harold's clipped tone. "Once the last set of documents is processed, it won't matter what she asks." My stomach tightened, not in panic, but in confirmation. I had suspected the storm. Now I could hear it forming. Footsteps approached, so I stepped away and moved calmly toward the drinking fountain. Moments later, the accountant, the same timid young man from before, hurried out, clutching a folder to his chest. He barely glanced at me. Good. Invisible is useful. When he turned down the hall, I slipped into the office. The room smelled of burnt coffee and expensive ink. Filing cabinets lined one wall, each labeled with color-coded tags. I scanned quickly, pretending to look for a lost item, though my pulse beat with something close to purpose. My eyes landed on a drawer labeled Property and Financial Transfers. I tried the handle. Locked. Of course. But next to it, on the desk, sat a stack of documents waiting to be sorted. I recognized the top page instantly. My name printed in bold letters. Doyle, Margaret, Transfer Provisional Ownership. I lifted the page, reading line by line. My forged signature appeared again, this time approving a transfer of liability for all existing and projected debts of the care home. Projected debts. They wanted me to shoulder the future, not just the past. Beneath that was another sheet. Notes from someone's meeting. Children agreed to expedite process. MD unaware of full financial state. Ensure no interruption to restructuring timeline. My initials. MD. As if I were a puzzle piece they'd already placed. I slid the papers under my sweater. Not theft. Evidence. Just as I turned to leave, I saw something else on a side table. A thick ledger, half open, with sticky tabs marking sections. One tab caught my eye. Registry. Ownership history. I opened to the marked page. My breath caught for the briefest moment. My name wasn't written once. It was written 3 times. Dated weeks before I ever stepped foot in this place. Someone had been preparing to use my name long before my children dropped me at the front door. I copied the dates onto a notepad I kept tucked inside my sleeve. Then I closed the ledger exactly as I'd found it. In my years running the hardware store, I learned an old truth. People only notice what changes, never what returns to where they left it. A shadow passed the doorway. I slid away from the table just as Harold stepped in. "Mrs. Doyle," he said, surprised but smiling. "You're far from the recreation room." "I was looking for the restroom," I answered smoothly. He studied me a moment too long, his eyes searching for something. Fear, confusion, submission. I offered none of it. "Let me walk you back," he said. "No need," I replied, and stepped past him, brushing just close enough to let him feel my steadiness. Halfway down the hall, I heard him speak softly into his phone. "She's getting curious. Keep an eye on her." It didn't scare me. It clarified the stakes. I returned to my room and closed the door quietly. I laid out the papers on the desk, smoothing them with careful fingers. Every forged signature, every note, every timestamp painted the same picture. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't a rushed decision by panicked children. It was a plan. A long one. But Harold Quinn didn't understand women like me. He didn't understand the years I'd spent balancing budgets by candlelight, or the way I learned to read the space between someone's words. He didn't know that I'd fixed broken ledgers and broken hearts with equal precision. I gathered the papers and tucked them into my pillowcase. Evidence has to be kept close, like matches during a storm. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. "Grandma, it's Lily. Mom and Uncle Daniel won't tell me anything. Are you okay? Should I come?" My granddaughter. The only one who asked how I was instead of what I could give. I typed back slowly, each letter steady. "I'm fine, sweetheart. But I need you to keep this between us for now. I'll explain everything soon." Her reply came almost instantly. "I trust you." I closed my eyes for a moment. Trust, real trust, feels like a hand on the shoulder in the dark. Then I stood, straightening my sweater. They thought I would fold quietly, but I had just started pulling the first thread, and I knew exactly how to unravel the rest. Lily didn't wait for my invitation. She arrived the next afternoon, her footsteps quick and decisive, in a place where most people drifted instead of walked. I heard her voice at the front desk before I saw her, calm, polite, but firm in a way that reminded me of myself at her age. When she appeared in my doorway, her eyes flooded with relief. "Grandma." I stood, and she hugged me with the sincerity of someone who still understood what family meant. Her hair smelled of fresh rain and library books. She always carried a little of the outside world with her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Mom and Uncle Daniel, they're hiding something. I could tell. They kept changing the subject whenever I mentioned you. I know, I said quietly. Sit down, Lily. There's more. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, waiting for truth the way other people wait for bad weather, bracing, but not afraid. I reached into my pillowcase and pulled out the papers I had taken from administration. Her eyebrows lifted as she unfolded the first page. This is their plan, I said. Not just the sale, not just the signature. They've been preparing to use my name to carry this home's debts. She scanned the documents, her face tightening. Grandma, this is fraud. Serious fraud. I know. And they did this with Mom's consent? With Daniel's? They signed authorization, I said. More than once, by the look of it. She exhaled slowly, pressing her palm to her forehead. I knew something was wrong when Mom told me you were better off resting there for a while. She wouldn't look me in the eyes. I watched her absorb it all. She wasn't dramatic, not like Christine. She processed quietly, carefully, every thought visible in the crease of her brow. How long has this been happening? She asked. Longer than they've admitted. Lily lowered the papers. Grandma, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because, I said, I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I pulled anyone else into it. And because you're the only one who listens without trying to rearrange my life. Her eyes softened. And because, I added, I didn't want you to see your mother this way. She sat quietly for a moment, then spoke with a steadiness beyond her 20 years. I love Mom. But love doesn't mean pretending she's right. That struck something inside me, something old and bruised. Grandma, she said, leaning forward, you can't stay here. I know. And you can't confront them alone. I know that too. She looked down at the papers again, shaking her head. Quinn is desperate. You can smell it in the way this is rushed. He thinks he can pressure you into signing the final ownership forms. I nodded. He's already tried. Her jaw clenched. We need a plan. A real one. I smiled faintly. I've been building one. She blinked. You. Without help? Quietly, I said. The way old women are good at doing things. I told her about the forged signatures, the whispered conversations, the ledger with my name written weeks before I arrived. She listened without interrupting, her eyes sharp. This isn't just unethical, she said when I finished. It's illegal. And if the debts fall on you, they won't, I said firmly. She reached for my hand. Then tell me what you want me to do. Those words, simple, direct, were more grace than anything my own children had offered in months. I need a lawyer, I said. One who isn't tied to this town. Quiet, precise. And I need you to gather everything you can about the sale of my house. She nodded instantly. I'll do it today. And Lily? She paused. Say nothing to your mother. Not yet. She'll warn Daniel, and he'll warn Quinn. A slow understanding widened in her eyes. They don't know you're onto them. Not fully, I said, and that's the only advantage I have. She squeezed my hand once more and stood. Then we'll keep it that way. When she left, I sat alone again, but not alone the way I'd been yesterday. There was a strength in the air around me now, quiet but real. My granddaughter believed me. And sometimes, belief is the first brick in rebuilding a life someone else tried to take. Lily moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, she had already sent me a discreet text before breakfast. Found someone. Trustworthy. Meeting set for tomorrow. No details, no names, just enough to let me breathe a little easier. She understood that in a place where every word could echo into the wrong ears, silence was the safest language. I tucked the phone away and walked toward the dining room. My gait had steadied over the past few days, not because I was stronger, but because purpose has a way of straightening the spine. The staff noticed. Their glances lingered too long, as if they sensed something shifting in me and weren't sure whether to fear it or dismiss it. After breakfast, I asked to take a walk around the courtyard. Emily accompanied me. She didn't hover, she didn't instruct. She simply walked alongside, giving me the kind of respect most people reserve for the able-bodied. When we reached a quiet corner, she lowered her voice. "Mr. Quinn is tense today," she said, agitated. "He's been making calls since sunrise." "Good," I said softly. "Let him worry." She blinked, surprised by my tone, then smiled just a little. "I won't ask what you're planning." "And I won't tell you," I replied, "for your sake." We walked another few minutes before she returned inside. I stayed behind, sitting on a wooden bench beneath a tree that shed leaves with the gentle patience of old age. I took out the documents again, smoothing the pages on my lap. I had looked at them enough times to know what they meant, but today I searched for something different. Patterns, names, dates, motives. And I found one. At the bottom of a financial ledger, beneath a list of outstanding debts, one line was marked Urgent Deadline. The date was just a week away. A loan secured by the property itself, this care home, was due. If it defaulted, the owner would be liable, the owner they intended to make me. I felt a slow burn behind my ribs. Not anger exactly, something steadier, something like recognition. Harold wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. And desperate men rush their schemes. Rushed schemes leave cracks. I stood, folded the papers, and headed inside. Today was not for confrontation. Today was for gathering threads. In the hallway near administration, I noticed the accountant again. He was carrying a stack of folders, his shoulders hunched. "Good morning," I said. He jumped. "Mrs. Doyle, I didn't see you." "You rarely do," I murmured. His face reddened. "Is there something you need?" "You look tired," I said. He exhaled, a long, defeated breath. "We all are. Mr. Quinn is pushing everything through faster than usual. Deadlines, audits. It's a mess." "Whose deadlines?" I asked gently. He hesitated, then whispered, "The lenders. If the restructuring isn't finalized, the debt rolls over and—" He stopped, realizing he'd said too much. "And someone gets blamed," I finished. He nodded. "Someone convenient," I added. His silence confirmed it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You know the documents are forged." He swallowed hard. I didn't ask you to admit it," I said. "Just to think about who they'll sacrifice when things collapse." His eyes flicked toward Harold's office. Fear, loyalty, guilt, all braided together. I left him with his thoughts. Whether he would act or not didn't matter. He now understood I wasn't wandering lost through their plans. Back in my room, I sat at the desk and began writing a list. Something I'd always done when life needed sorting. Not emotions, not questions. Facts. House sold without consent. Signature forged. Guardianship documents falsified. Ownership transfer prepared in advance. Loan deadline approaching. Children involved, extent unclear. Lily trustworthy. Evidence secured. The list looked cleaner on paper than it felt in my chest, but I wasn't overwhelmed. I was sharpening the blade. By afternoon, I felt the shift in the air, staff moving faster, voices tense. Something was happening behind doors, something they thought I wouldn't notice. But I did, and tomorrow, with Lily's help, I would leave this place, not to run, but to strike. Because I was done being the quiet name they planned to sign under their debts. They had mistaken age for weakness. They were about to learn the difference. By the next morning, the care home felt tight, like a house that had shrunk overnight. Staff moved quickly, but avoided eye contact. Doors that were usually open now stayed shut. Even the air seemed thinner. Something had rattled Harold, and rattled men try to tighten their grip before they lose it entirely. After breakfast, he appeared in the dining room wearing the kind of smile people paste on when they're afraid the truth is catching up to them. "Mrs. Doyle," he said smoothly, "I'd like to meet with you this afternoon to finalize the remaining documents. It's all very routine." Routine. Another soft lie dressed as reassurance. "I'll consider it," I answered. His smile faltered just enough to let me enjoy it. Back in my room, I checked my phone. A message from Lily. "Lawyer meeting confirmed for 3 p.m. tomorrow. I'll pick you up." Tomorrow. That meant I had 1 day left to stay invisible, and 1 day left to gather anything else I might need. I tucked the phone away, then walked down the hallway with the slow steadiness they expected from me. People reveal more when they think you're harmless. Near administration, raised voices slipped through the door. "If she doesn't sign today, the bank—" I know, but she's resisting." "Then apply pressure." A drawer slammed. I stepped away before anyone noticed me, but not before I saw Harold pacing inside, his tie loosened, his hair pushed back like he'd been running his hands through it. Good. Pressure on him meant less pressure on me. In the afternoon, I decided to rest in the lounge, though resting was the last thing on my mind. A small television murmured in the corner, unwatched. A few residents dozed. I sat near the window with a crossword book open on my lap, pretending to fill squares while watching the hallway reflections in the glass. Twice I saw Harold's shadow pass. Twice he stopped, as if deciding whether to enter, then moved on. A man unsure of his next move is a man afraid of choosing the wrong one. Around 2, Emily approached and sat quietly beside me. "He's going to push you today," she whispered. "Harder than before." "I expected that," I said. Her eyes darted to the window, then back to me. "Be careful. He told the staff you might be confused or unstable. It sounded like he was preparing them for something." I nodded, though my jaw tightened. I knew what that meant. If a woman my age raised her voice or refused instructions, it was easy for men like Harold to call it confusion. They'd mistake defiance for decline if it served them. "Thank you," I said. "You don't have to risk this." She shook her head. "I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet." She returned to her duties, leaving me with one more truth. There were still decent people left, even here. An hour later, Harold found me. "Mrs. Doyle," he said, the sour edge of impatience seeping into his voice. "We really must finish those documents today." "I'm not signing anything," I replied calmly. He stepped closer. "You don't understand. Your children already authorized—" "I understand perfectly." His jaw tightened. "Then you know what's at stake." "For whom?" I asked softly. For a moment, the mask slipped. I saw fear. Not of me, but of everything collapsing around him. He lowered his voice. "If the restructuring fails, this facility shuts down. People lose jobs. Residents are displaced. And your children—" He caught himself, but not soon enough. My children what? I asked. He exhaled sharply. They've made commitments. Financial ones. If you don't cooperate, they'll face consequences. So that was his angle. Guilt. A familiar tool, a blunt one. Mr. Quinn, I said, rising slowly, I've spent my life carrying other people's burdens. My husband's illness, my children's crises, every unexpected bill, every broken thing. But I will not carry your debts, and I will not let you use my name to shield your failures. His mouth opened and closed once, like a man who had found every argument empty. I walked past him without waiting for a reply. In my room, I locked the door, packed the forged documents into my bag, and sat in the quiet. Tomorrow, Lily would arrive. Tomorrow, I would walk out of this place. Not as a patient, not as an owner, but as a woman who finally stopped being quiet. Lily arrived just before noon, her car pulling up to the front entrance with a confidence that made even the receptionist straighten in her chair. I saw her through the window as I waited near the lobby, my bag already packed and hidden beneath my coat. She looked calm, but her eyes were sharp, prepared in a way I wished my own children had been when life demanded courage. When she stepped inside, Harold appeared almost instantly, as if he'd been waiting for her. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but defensive. "I'm here for my grandmother," Lily said. "We have an appointment." He smiled the way men do when speaking to someone they think they can dismiss. "She hasn't been cleared for outings." "She doesn't need to be cleared," Lily replied. "She's not a minor." His jaw tightened. "This is highly irregular." "No," she said. "What's irregular is forging documents under her name." He froze, just long enough for the truth to register. Then he recovered, too quickly. "I don't know what you've been told." "You don't need to," she said. "We're leaving." He looked at me then, searching my face for a crack he could wedge himself into. Some sign of confusion, weakness, hesitation. "You understand," he said slowly, "that leaving now may complicate matters. Your children have entrusted us with your care." "They entrusted you with control," I corrected, "not care." Lily stepped closer, a protective presence beside me. "If you try to stop us, Mr. Quinn, I'll call the police. And then a reporter. I have every document she saved, every signature you falsified. You can decide who sees them first." His eyes flicked, fear again, that brittle kind. And for the first time, he stepped back. "Very well," he said quietly. "But this isn't wise." "Neither," I replied, "is underestimating an old woman." We walked out before he could answer. Lily kept her arm linked with mine as we crossed the parking lot. The cold air was a relief, as if the whole world had opened a window after too many days of stale breath. Inside the car, she exhaled shakily. "I thought he was going to block the door." "He would have," I said, "if you hadn't spoken the way you did." "I wasn't sure I could pull it off." "You didn't pull anything off," I corrected gently. "You spoke the truth. It's the one thing men like him can't negotiate with." She started the engine and pulled away from the building. Only when we turned onto the main road did she speak again. "Grandma, Mom texted me this morning. She said something came up with the house sale." I didn't respond. "What did she say exactly?" "That they fixed the paperwork and everything is finalized, but it's best if you don't worry about it." I looked out the window at the passing trees. "They're preparing their excuses." Lily swallowed. "Do you want to see her? Or Daniel?" "Not yet," I said. "Not until I understand how deep they're in." She nodded, gripping the wheel. The car hummed steadily beneath us, carrying me away from the building that had tried to swallow my name. We arrived at a small law office in a converted house on the outskirts of town. Lily parked and turned to me. "He's expecting us. He's good, Grandma. My friend used him during a property dispute." "Good," I said, gathering the folder of evidence. "Because we're not dealing with mistakes. We're dealing with intentions." Inside, the lawyer, a quiet man with kind eyes, rose to greet us. "Mrs. Doyle," he said, shaking my hand. "Lily told me you're facing something complicated." "Complicated," I said, "but clear." We sat, and for the first time, I emptied the folder on his desk. Every forged signature, every transfer form, every note I had copied by hand. He read in silence, his frown deepening. When he finally looked up, his voice was low and steady. "Mrs. Doyle, what they've done is illegal on several levels, and if that loan deadline is a week away, they intended to make you responsible for the fallout." "I know." "We need to act quickly," he continued, "not just to protect you, but to expose the pattern." He paused, then asked the question I had been waiting for someone to ask clearly. "Do you believe your children were coerced into this, or were they willing participants?" I closed my eyes. The answer hurt more than the stroke ever had. "They were willing," I said, "because it benefited them." Lily reached for my hand, her grip warm, steady. The lawyer nodded. "Then this won't be easy." I opened my eyes and met his gaze. "Nothing worth reclaiming ever is." He smiled faintly. "I'll start the filings today. And Mrs. Doyle, you did the right thing by getting out." I straightened in my chair, feeling the weight on my shoulders shift, not vanish, but move into a place I could carry. "I didn't get out," I said. "I'm just stepping back in." I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, but from a strange, steady clarity that felt almost like a second youth, a mind sharpened, not dulled, by what had been taken from me. The lawyer had promised filings would begin first thing in the morning. Now all that was left was to see what Harold and his crumbling kingdom would do when someone finally pushed back. By mid-morning, the care home was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Staff rushed between offices carrying clipboards. 2 administrators whispered urgently near the elevator. Even the receptionist kept glancing at the front door every few minutes, as if expecting unwelcome company. They were right to expect it. Just before noon, a dark blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. 2 people got out, one carrying a briefcase, the other a tablet. Not police, not reporters. Auditors. Real ones. I watched from the window as Harold burst through the entrance, shaking hands too quickly, his smile stretched thin. I stepped into the hallway, leaning lightly on my cane. Not for balance, just to look the part of someone they still believed was easy to overlook. The auditors asked for access to financial files. They spoke crisply, directly, the kind of tone that refuses to be soothed by charm. Harold led them toward administration, and I followed at a slow, harmless distance. When I reached the doorway, one of the auditors looked up. "Mrs. Doyle?" he asked. Harold stiffened. "Yes," I answered. "That's me." "We might need to speak with you as well," the auditor said. "Regarding your role in the property filings." "My role," I said gently, "was never voluntary." The auditor wrote something down. Inside the office, the young accountant sat pale as paper while they examined the ledgers. The same ledgers I'd studied, the same ones with my name appearing months before it should have. One of the auditors stopped at a page and tapped it. "This signature, this is yours, Mrs. Doyle." "No," I said. Do you know who signed it? I know who benefited from it, I answered. That should be enough to start. Harold cleared his throat sharply. She's been confused since her stroke. It's best to take her statements with caution. The auditor raised a hand. We'll determine that. The accountant looked at me, then at the auditors, and, for the first time, I saw something break open in him. Not courage, exactly. Conscience. He swallowed hard. Sir, some of the documents were prepared without her being present. Harold whipped around. That's not true. It is, the accountant whispered. A single sentence, but it was enough to tilt the room. The auditors pressed him with quiet questions. He answered them in fragments, each one a thread tugged loose from Harold's narrative. Sweat gathered at Harold's temples. His mask didn't slip this time. It cracked. When they asked Harold to provide the original authorizations from my children, he hesitated too long. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. It was empty. The auditors exchanged a look. Mr. Quinn, one said, we'll need you to step outside while we finish reviewing. Harold resisted. I saw it in the set of his shoulders. But resistance wasn't an option for a man whose walls were finally being measured. He left the office without looking at me. I stayed. The auditors continued working, photographing documents, marking pages, asking me to confirm what I had personally witnessed. I answered simply, cleanly, no embellishment, no performance. Women my age don't need performance. We have truth, and that's enough. After nearly an hour, one of them closed a folder and turned to me. Mrs. Doyle, he said, based on what we've found, you may have been placed in legal and financial jeopardy without consent. We will be escalating this immediately. I nodded. That's why I contacted counsel. He glanced at the cracked open ledger again. It was wise of you. When the auditors left the office, I followed them into the corridor. Harold stood near the end of the hall, arms crossed, face hard and brittle. He looked at me the way a man looks at a door he forgot to lock. You've caused trouble today, he said quietly. No, I replied. I revealed it. This isn't over. I know, I said. That's what you're afraid of. I walked past him, back toward my room, my cane tapping softly on the floor. It didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like a countdown. Tomorrow, the filings would go public. Tomorrow, the bank would receive notice. Tomorrow, my children would learn the truth I had given them every chance to tell themselves. But today, the walls of Harold's careful world finally began to shake. The next morning came with a strange hush, too heavy to be called silence. It was the quiet that settles right before a storm breaks. I felt it the moment I stepped into the hallway. The staff moved carefully, their eyes alert, as if each of them had been warned to stay out of something they no longer understood. I reached the lobby just as the first police car pulled into the lot. Not rushing, not dramatic, just steady, like the truth arriving exactly on time. 2 officers stepped out, followed by another dark sedan, this one with a state investigator. The receptionist's hands fluttered uselessly over her keyboard before she stood to greet them. I didn't need to be told why they were here. The auditors had done their work. The lawyer had filed the injunction. The bank, alerted to forged signatures, had frozen the transfer. All of it had collided overnight, and this morning Harold Quinn would finally meet the consequences he thought he'd buried under paperwork. From the hallway, I watched Harold descend the stairs. His face looked different, flushed, unsettled. The charm drained out of him. He approached the officers with a smile that tried too hard. What seems to be the problem, gentlemen? They didn't mirror his smile. Mr. Quinn, We're here in response to allegations of financial misconduct and fraudulent authorization documents involving this facility's ownership structure. His expression twitched. Misunderstandings. This is a senior care home. Mistakes happen. Forgery isn't a mistake, the investigator said flatly. I walked forward then, slow but deliberate. Harold saw me and stiffened. You, he whispered, as if saying the word out loud might summon more trouble. You did this. No, I answered. You did. The officers asked Harold to accompany them to administration. He hesitated just long enough for everyone to see the truth in his fear, then gestured stiffly toward the office. As they passed me, the investigator paused. Mrs. Doyle, we may need a statement shortly. I'll be here, I said. Inside the office, voices rose and fell. Papers shuffled, drawers opened. A man tried and failed to maintain control. Staff gathered at a distance, some whispering, others simply watching the collapse of a man who had once strutted through the halls like he owned the place. I sat in a chair near the lobby window, my cane resting across my lap. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter, relief perhaps, but edged with sadness. I had never wanted destruction, only truth. After 20 minutes, the investigator returned with a folder, thick, worn, marked with the tabs I remembered from my search. These documents, he said, contain multiple instances of your name listed as part owner before your admission date. Did you authorize any of this? No. Did your children explain any of these filings to you? No. He nodded slowly, writing. The auditor's findings support what you've said. This facility has been mismanaged for years. Mr. Quinn attempted to shield the debts by assigning them to you. Without my knowledge, I said. Without your consent, he confirmed. Behind him, an officer escorted the accountant out of the office. The young man looked shaken, but lighter somehow, as if telling the truth had finally let him breathe. A moment later, Harold emerged between two officers. He wasn't handcuffed, but he looked smaller somehow, as though he'd already begun collapsing inward. This isn't finished, he hissed at me. Yes, I said softly. It is. He was led outside. The doors closed behind him with a soft thud that felt like the end of a long-held breath. When the lobby emptied again, I sat in silence. The storm had broken. But storms don't end everything. They reveal what still stands. Emily approached quietly and rested a hand on my shoulder. I'm glad you're safe, she said. I am, I answered. Finally. Will you stay here until everything is sorted? No, I said. I didn't come here willingly, and I won't stay willingly either. She nodded, understanding more than my words. I stood with her help, steadier than I had felt in weeks. I looked around the lobby, at the walls that had listened to lies, at the doors that had kept me contained, at the floors worn by quiet desperation. You'll be okay now, Emily said. No, I replied gently, but I'll be free. Outside, I saw Lily's car turning into the lot. My life wasn't whole yet, not by any measure, but the people who had tried to take it from me had finally been stopped. And now it was time for the truth to face my children. Lily parked a few streets away from the care home, far enough that we wouldn't be seen by anyone still watching the entrance. I slid into the passenger seat, my bag of documents on my lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The morning felt suspended, like the world itself was holding still, waiting for me to take the next step. Are you ready? Lily asked. I've been ready for a long time, I said. We drove in quiet, not awkward silence, purposeful silence. the kind that gathers strength. My lawyer had already prepared everything: the injunction, the fraud report, the request to freeze any accounts tied to the sale of my house. But there was one more thing I needed to face before anything else could heal. My children. They lived only 10 minutes apart. By design, they had always said. Family should stay close. Yet somehow, they'd drifted an ocean away from the meaning of that word. We went to Christine's house first. Lily offered to come inside, but I shook my head. "This part," I said, "I need to do alone." When Christine opened the door, she looked startled, then guilty, and then, almost instantly, annoyed. Guilt is a fragile emotion. Annoyance is easier to wear. "Mom?" "You should have called. I'm busy." "So was I said. "Busy discovering my home was sold and my name was used in crimes." Her face froze. "Come in," she whispered, stepping aside quickly. I walked into the spotless living room, the one she'd refused to let me help paint last year because she didn't want me straining myself. Now I understood the subtext. I was useful only when I could be arranged neatly, like furniture. "What are you talking about?" she asked, voice thin. "Mom, you're confused." "No," I said. "I was confused. About you. Not anymore." I opened my bag and set the documents on her coffee table. Her eyes skimmed the first page, and color drained from her face. "Mom, where did you get these?" "The proper question is, why did you sign them?" She sat heavily on the couch. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone folded her inward. "Daniel said it was temporary, that we needed to secure things, protect you." "Protect me by erasing me?" I asked. She covered her face with her hands. "We didn't know it would go this far." "You knew exactly what it was," I said quietly. "You knew before I even moved into that home." Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not by tears that came only when consequences arrived. "Mom, we were desperate," she whispered. "Daniel's investment, it sank. We needed money fast. He said selling the house was the only option." "And using my name?" I asked. "Forging my signature?" She didn't answer. Silence is an answer, too. I stood. "You could have told me the truth. I might have helped willingly. Instead, you tried to bury me inside a place that was never meant to care for me." She reached out suddenly, grabbing my sleeve. "Mom, please, we can fix this." I gently pulled my arm free. "You can face it. That's what you'll do." Her mouth trembled. "What happens now?" "Legal consequences," I said. "Financial ones. The lawyer will contact you." "You're turning on your own children?" "I'm turning away from the lie," I said softly. "Not from you. You chose this path. I'm choosing the truth." I left before she could answer. At the car, Lily didn't ask what happened. She saw the set of my shoulders and simply nodded. Next, we drove to Daniel's house. He wasn't surprised to see me, only irritated, like someone interrupted during a game he assumed he was winning. "Mom," he said, "this isn't a good time." "You'll make time," I replied. He scoffed, but he stepped back to let me in. "What now?" he asked. "More accusations?" "No," I said. "Just facts." I set the remaining documents on his kitchen table. He didn't bother to pick them up. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "You're old, Mom." "You needed this. The house was too much for you." "Then why didn't I get the money?" I asked. He hesitated, a fatal pause. "I invested it," he said finally. "It could have doubled. I was trying to secure your future." "My future," I repeated, "by removing every choice I had in it." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You should be grateful. We did everything for your own good. I felt something inside me settle, deep, final. No, Daniel. You did everything for your own comfort. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I'm filing charges, I said. Fraud, forgery, elder exploitation. His face hardened. You wouldn't. You already did, I answered. I'm only naming it. He looked away, angry, but underneath it, afraid. I turned toward the door. You can hate me if you need to, I said. But you will not control me again. Outside, Lily squeezed my hand. You okay? She asked. Yes, I said, surprised by the truth of it. I finally am. Tomorrow, the restitution process would begin. Tomorrow, the courts would decide what I was owed. But today, I reclaimed something far more important than money. My dignity. It took months for everything to settle. Legal work is slow, even when the truth is sharp enough to cut through the paperwork. But each week brought another small restoration of what had been taken from me. First, the bank releasing the freeze, then the investigation confirming the forged signatures, then the restitution order filed against Daniel and Christine. I didn't attend every hearing. Some wounds shouldn't be watched as they're cleaned. But my lawyer kept me informed, and Lily sat beside me through each update, her presence grounding me more than she knew. The money from the sale of my home was recovered, piece by piece. Not all of it. Some had vanished into Daniel's failed investment. But enough remained that the court could return what was rightfully mine. When the judge asked how I wanted the funds dispersed, I gave the answer I'd already carried in my heart. A trust, I said. In Lily's name. For her future. The judge nodded. My lawyer did too. Lily cried quietly, the kind of tears that come from gratitude, not sorrow. As for the care home, Harold Quinn's empire collapsed quickly once the truth was exposed. The building was shut down, pending permanent closure. The residents were transferred, safely, respectfully, to other facilities run by people who still remembered what dignity meant. Emily found work at a different center. She called me once to say she missed my steady walking pace in the hallway. I told her I missed her honesty. Harold faced charges. My children faced consequences of a different kind. Legal ones first, yes. But the heavier ones came from the silence that followed, a silence I chose not out of anger, but out of necessity. When trust fractures, you can't glue it back by pretending it never cracked. I didn't cut them out of my life. I simply stopped carrying the weight that wasn't mine. And now, months later, I live in a small cottage near the edge of town. A quiet place with a crooked porch and a stubborn wind that knocks at the windows at night. I bought it myself. My name is on the deed, printed cleanly, signed in the hand that has been mine for 74 years. Some mornings, I sit on the steps with a cup of tea and watch the world wake up around me. Birds, a dog from the neighbor's yard, a school bus in the distance. Simple things, steady things. The kinds of things you begin to cherish when life tries, unsuccessfully, to take them from you. Lily visits often. She brings books, groceries, sometimes nothing at all except her presence. We don't talk about what happened unless she asks. And when she does, I tell her the truth, plainly. That wasn't the end of my life, I say. It was the beginning of telling it honestly. I sometimes think of the woman I was when they placed me in that care home. Tired, quiet, trusting in all the wrong directions. I don't resent her. She did the best she could with what she knew. But I'm glad I didn't stay her. I'm glad I remembered myself in time. I don't need revenge. I don't need apologies. What I have now is far better. a life that belongs entirely to me again. A life lived not in waiting rooms or whispered explanations, but in sunlight, in open air, in my own name. If there's anything my story proves, it's this. We don't lose our voice with age. We lose it when we let others speak for us. And I will never make that mistake again. So if you're reading this, if you've ever felt pushed aside, or silenced, or made small, listen to an old woman who learned her lesson late but well. Stand up for yourself while you still can. And if you've already forgotten how, start by remembering you're worth the fight. If this story spoke to you, share it. Someone out there may need the reminder that dignity doesn't disappear with age. It waits to be claimed.